Look closely. This isn't silence. This is restraint. Because the most dangerous people don't announce themselves. They sharpen in the dark. Zorro was never the loudest in the room. He didn't beg for attention. He didn't explain his pain. He carried it. Every step he took was heavy. Not because the path was hard, but because the promise he made to himself was heavier. You think strength is screaming? No. Strength is waking up injured and still choosing the sword while others slept. He trained while others complained. He endured while others quit. He stood there bleeding and said nothing because some pain is too deep for words. He wasn't born special. He wasn't chosen by destiny. He chose himself again and again and again. People saw him as lost, wandering, silent, but they never saw the war inside his chest. A war between doubt and discipline, fear and loyalty, pain and pride. There were moments when his body begged him to stop, when his hands shook, when his vision blurred, when the world told him, "You've done enough." And still, he stepped forward. Because quitting would have been louder than any scream. He lost battles. He tasted humiliation. He knelt in front of enemies. Not because he was weak, but because his goal was bigger than his ego. That's the part people don't understand. True warriors don't protect pride. They protect purpose. Zorro didn't chase comfort. He chased a promise. A promise made in blood, sweat, and silence. And every scar on his body is a sentence in his story. A story that says, "I survived what should have broken me." You're watching this because some part of you understands that pain. The pain of carrying dreams no one else believes in. The pain of being strong without being appreciated. The pain of staying disciplined when nobody is watching. And sometimes you wonder if it's even worth it anymore. But tell me, when everything inside you hurts, when no one claps for your effort, when the journey feels endless, will you throw down your sword, or will you stay silent and become dangerous? Pain didn't slow him down. Pain introduced him to who he really was. Zorro never asked for an easy road. He asked for a real one. A road where every step cost something. A road where weakness was exposed and excuses were burned away. Because he understood one brutal truth. If you can't carry pain, you can't carry greatness. There were nights when his muscles screamed louder than his thoughts. When every breath felt like punishment. When the sword felt heavier than his own body. And in those moments, he didn't pray for relief. He tightened his grip. Because pain was proof. Proof that he was still moving forward. Proof that he wasn't running from the work. Others measured strength by victories. Zorro measured it by endurance. How long can you stand when your body wants to collapse? How long can you push when motivation disappears? That's where warriors are separated from spectators. He didn't train to look strong. He trained to survive hell. Every cut, every fall, every defeat became another lesson carved into his bones. Not to complain, not to explain, but to adapt. There's a reason he walks with calm eyes. It's not confidence. It's familiarity. He's been here before. In the pain, in the doubt, in the moment where giving up feels reasonable. And he rejected it every time. Because discipline isn't loud. It doesn't need approval. It doesn't wait for perfect conditions. Discipline shows up injured. Discipline shows up tired. Discipline shows up even when hope is low. Zorro knew that if he ever let himself rest on excuses, he would lose something far more dangerous than a fight. He would lose respect for himself. And that loss is harder to recover from than any wound. So he chose suffering, not because he loved pain, but because he loved his goal more. You feel it too, don't you? That quiet pressure in your chest. The voice that says, you're capable of more. But every day the world gives you reasons to slow down, to settle, to stay comfortable. And right now, you're standing at the same crossroads he stood at. You can listen to the pain, or you can let the pain sharpen you. So answer honestly. Is your struggle breaking you, or is it turning you into someone you're afraid to become? He stopped explaining himself a long time ago. Not because he had nothing to say, but because words stopped being useful. Zorro learned early that the loudest people are usually hiding the weakest discipline. So he chose silence, not the silence of fear, the silence of focus. While others talked about their plans, he bled for his. While others needed praise to move forward, he needed only one thing: progress. Silence became his shield. It protected him from doubt, from distraction, from the noise that makes people forget why they started. Because the truth is, most people don't fail because they're weak. They fail because they're scattered. Their energy is everywhere. Their attention is nowhere. Zorro cut that out of his life. The same way he cut through enemies. Without hesitation. No announcements. No warnings. Just action. There were days when no one believed in him. Days when his effort went unnoticed. Days when the only witness to his grind was pain itself. And that was enough. Because he understood something most people never do. Validation makes you dependent. Silence makes you dangerous. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop negotiating with your potential. You move differently. You think clearly. You act with purpose. Zorro didn't need the world to understand him. He needed the world to feel him. That's why his presence is heavy. That's why his calm is intimidating. That's why his eyes never beg for approval. He already knows what he's willing to sacrifice. And sacrifice is what separates desire from destiny. Everyone wants the title. Few accept the cost. The lonely training. The misunderstood discipline. The nights where doubt whispers. And there's no one to silence it but you. Zorro faced those nights head on. No audience. No applause. Just commitment. And that's when something changes inside you. You stop chasing recognition. You stop reacting emotionally. You stop wasting time proving anything. You become efficient. Precise. Unshakable. Tell me, when was the last time you worked in silence? Not posting. Not announcing. Not seeking reassurance. Just you and the work. Because right now, your silence can either mean hesitation, or it can mean preparation. So, answer this. Are you quiet because you're afraid to be seen? Or because you're building something the world isn't ready to face? Zorro didn't become strong by accident. Strength was forced on him. by pain he never ran from. Every scar on his body is a lesson he chose to learn the hard way. Most people avoid pain. Zorro studied it. He understood something early. If pain scares you, you'll always live under someone else's shadow. So he stopped asking for comfort. He stopped waiting for perfect conditions. He stopped caring how long it would take. He only cared about one thing: never being weak again. Discipline became his religion, not motivation. Motivation fades. Discipline stays even when the body wants to quit, even when the mind is tired, even when the soul feels empty. Zorro trained on days when no one would blame him for resting. That's where the gap was created. Because the difference between average and elite isn't talent. It's what you do when no one is watching and nothing feels rewarding. He pushed through exhaustion, not because he enjoyed it, but because he respected the future version of himself. He knew one truth: every excuse you accept today becomes a weakness tomorrow. So he sharpened more than his swords. He sharpened his control. Control over fear. Control over anger. Control over ego. Ego makes noise. Control stays silent. That's why Zorro doesn't rush. He doesn't panic. He doesn't break under pressure. He already fought his worst enemy, himself. And once you conquer that, no opponent feels impossible. Pain stopped being punishment. It became proof. Proof that he was still moving forward. Proof that he was still paying the price others weren't willing to pay. People think strength is about power. It's not. It's about restraint. Knowing when to speak. Knowing when to wait. Knowing when to strike. Zorro mastered patience, because impatience ruins warriors. He let others underestimate him. He let them talk. He let them doubt, because discipline doesn't need approval. And here's the truth most people hate. The path to greatness is boring, lonely, and repetitive. Same grind, same pain, same silence, over and over again. That's why most people quit. But Zorro didn't need excitement. He needed results. So ask yourself, are you disciplined enough to keep going when nothing feels special? When progress is slow? When effort is invisible? When no one claps? Because that's the moment where warriors are separated from the crowd. So tell me, will you choose comfort and stay average? Or will you choose discipline and become someone your past self would fear? Zorro didn't announce his pain. He swallowed it. While others explained their struggles, he stayed quiet and carried them. Because he learned early. Complaining doesn't reduce pain. It only exposes weakness. So he trained in silence, bled in silence, failed in silence. And that silence did something dangerous. It hardened him. Not the loud, reckless kind of heart. The controlled kind. The kind that doesn't flinch. Most people want to be seen struggling. They want sympathy. They want understanding. Zorro wanted results. He understood that pain spoken often becomes pain wasted. Pain endured becomes strength stored. Every time his body screamed, his will answered louder. No excuses, no speeches, no drama, just another step forward. Silence became his shield. Because when you stop explaining yourself, you stop needing permission. He didn't need anyone to believe in him. He only needed to not betray himself. And that's where most people fail. They don't lose to enemies. They lose to their own need for comfort. Zorro cut that need out. He accepted loneliness as the price of becoming dangerous. Because growth doesn't happen in crowds. It happens when no one is there to distract you from the truth. And the truth is brutal. You either suffer now, or you suffer later. Zorro chose now. He chose the pain. That builds power, instead of the pain. That comes from regret. That's why he doesn't chase validation. That's why he doesn't explain his mindset. That's why he doesn't beg for respect. Respect follows strength, not words. And strength is built when no one is watching. Silence didn't make him weak. Silence made him lethal. Because the most dangerous people are the ones who learned how to suffer quietly and keep moving anyway. So ask yourself, are you loud about your struggle, but weak in your actions, or silent in your pain, and building something unstoppable? Because one path feels easier today. The other changes who you are forever. Which one are you choosing? There comes a moment when pain no longer surprises you. You don't react. You don't complain. You don't slow down. You accept it. The same way you accept breathing. That's when you become dangerous. Zorro reached that point. When losing stopped feeling like failure and started feeling like training. He had already been broken before. Already humiliated. Already pushed past what he thought were limits. So what was left to fear? When you've tasted rock bottom, you stop panicking about falling. That's why his eyes stay calm, even when everything is on the line. He's already paid the price. Most people are still avoiding. Pain no longer negotiates with him. It follows, because he never ran. He learned to stand still, while his body screamed. To stay focused, while everything inside him burned. That level of control changes how you move through the world. You stop rushing. You stop reacting emotionally. You stop needing reassurance. You trust your preparation. Zorro didn't become fearless. He became familiar with fear. And familiarity removes power. When fear shows up, he doesn't flinch. He doesn't argue. He steps forward. Because courage isn't a feeling. It's a decision repeated daily. He decided long ago that quitting would never be an option. Not because he was confident, but because he was committed. Commitment is heavier than confidence, and far more reliable. He accepted responsibility for his path. No excuses. No shortcuts. No blame. If he fell, it was on him. If he failed, it was his lesson. That ownership sharpened him. Most people want success, without responsibility. Zorro wanted mastery, and mastery demands sacrifice. You lose comfort. You lose approval. You lose the version of yourself that wanted things to be easy, but you gain something rare. Control. Control over your reactions. Control over your emotions. Control over your future. That's why Zorro doesn't look desperate. He looks inevitable. So tell me, if pain no longer scares you, if failure no longer stops you, if quitting no longer exists in your mind, what exactly can stand in your way now? This is where it ends. Not with noise, not with celebration, but with certainty. Zorro didn't need the world to understand him. He didn't need applause. He didn't need permission. He needed one thing: to never betray his own code. He stood when his body begged him to fall. He stayed silent when screaming would have been easier. He chose loyalty to his path over comfort, pride, and fear. That's why he never bows to pain. Pain bows to him. Because once you accept suffering without asking for mercy, nothing can break you anymore. The world tests loud people. It respects quiet ones. Zorro became quiet. Quiet in his confidence. Quiet in his strength. Quiet in his resolve. But don't confuse silence with weakness. Silence is where pressure builds. Pressure creates force. Force changes everything. He didn't win every fight. He didn't walk an easy road. But he never walked away from himself. And that's victory most people will never know. Now this isn't about Zorro anymore. It's about you. You felt that same pressure. That same loneliness. That same urge to quit. You're standing at the same line. One side is comfort. The other is greatness. Comfort is loud, crowded, and temporary. Greatness is silent, lonely, and permanent. So answer this honestly. When the pain demands submission, when the world offers you an easier path, when no one is watching your choices, will you kneel like the rest? Or will you stand in silence and become someone the world has no choice but to respect? Someone the world has no choice but to respect.